The carburetor fought me like it had a personal grudge, but at 2 in the morning, everything in my shop felt personal. Grease under my fingernails, the smell of motor oil thick in the air, and the distant hum of Cedar Heights settling into another restless night. That's when I heard Sophie's voice drifting from the office phone. "Mom deserves better than Dad," she was saying, her 17-year-old wisdom cutting through the silence. "I mean, look at him, a grease monkey who can't even afford to send me to state without loans. Meanwhile, Mom's crushing it at the real estate firm." I set down my wrench, wiping my hands on a rag that had seen better decades. My daughter continued her character assassination with the casual cruelty only teenagers could muster. "Devon says Dad's just threatened by successful women. That's why he's always making those sarcastic comments about Mom's work events." Devon. The name hit me like a sucker punch. Devon Martinez, the personal trainer who'd been sniffing around Erin's real estate firm for the past 6 months. The same Devon who'd shown up to our Memorial Day barbecue with his protein shakes and his too-white smile, complimenting my wife on her dedication to fitness while barely acknowledging my existence. I'd chalked it up to typical alpha male posturing. Apparently, I'd been more naive than I thought. Sophie's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Mom's been staying late a lot for work. She says it's the Henderson property deal, but I think she's just avoiding Dad's mood swings." Work. Right. Because the Henderson deal required meetings at the Sunset Motel on Route 9. I'd found the receipt in Erin's purse last week, tucked between her business cards like a dirty secret. When I'd asked about it, she'd given me some story about meeting clients in unconventional locations. "Modern real estate is all about accessibility, Jack," she'd said, not meeting my eyes. "Sometimes that means meeting people where they're comfortable." At the time, I'd bought it. Erin had always been ambitious, always pushing boundaries to close deals. It's what made her successful. It's also what made her insufferable at dinner parties. But I'd learned to live with that. Now, listening to my daughter trash me while praising the man who was apparently screwing my wife, I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not heartbreak. That would come later. This was something else. Recognition, maybe. The moment when you realize you've been playing checkers while everyone else moved to chess. I walked to the office doorway, clearing my throat. Sophie jumped, nearly dropping the phone. "Dad! I didn't know you were still here." Apparently not. I leaned against the doorframe, studying my daughter's face. She had Erin's eyes, calculating, always working an angle. "Interesting conversation?" Sophie's cheeks flushed. "Just talking to Madison about college stuff." College stuff. Right. I picked up my keys from the desk, jangling them thoughtfully. "Tell Madison I said hi. And Sophie, next time you want to discuss my shortcomings, maybe wait until I'm not within earshot. Common courtesy." She had the grace to look ashamed, but it didn't last long. 17-year-olds recovered from embarrassment faster than they recovered from hangovers. "Dad, I didn't mean—" "Sure you did." I headed for the door, then paused. "By the way, that Henderson deal your mom's been working so hard on? It closed 3 weeks ago. I saw the commission check on her desk." The color drained from Sophie's face. "Good. Let her chew on that for a while." I drove home through empty streets, past the shuttered factories that once made Cedar Heights a destination instead of a place people left. The streetlights cast everything in amber, making the whole town look like it was preserved in honey. Sweet on the surface, but scratch deep enough, and you'd find the decay underneath. Our house sat in the middle of Maple Street, a 2-story colonial that had seen better decades. Erin's BMW sat in the driveway next to my pickup truck, a visual metaphor for our marriage if there ever was one. Sleek and expensive next to practical and worn. I sat in the truck for a few minutes, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at the bedroom window. The light was on, which meant Erin was either reading or scrolling through her phone. Probably texting Devon about their next business meeting. The front door opened before I reached it. Erin stood in the doorway wearing her silk pajamas, the ones she'd bought for our anniversary last year. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and without makeup, she looked younger. More like the woman I'd married 15 years ago. "You're home late," she said, stepping aside to let me pass. "Shop's busy." I kicked off my boots, leaving them by the door. "How was your evening?" "Quiet. Sophie had homework, Max went to bed early." She followed me to the kitchen, where I grabbed a beer from the fridge. The Henderson closing went through. Big commission. I twisted off the cap, taking a long drink before responding. "Congratulations. Must feel good to wrap up a deal you've been working on for so long." Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or just irritation that I was being conversational instead of my usual grunting self. "It does." Mr. Henderson was very pleased with the service. I bet he was. I raised my beer in a mock toast. Here's to satisfied customers. Erin studied me with the same expression she used when evaluating properties, looking for flaws, calculating value, deciding whether something was worth her time. "You seem different tonight," she said finally. "Different how?" "I don't know. Less." She searched for the word. "Less defeated." Defeated. That's how my wife saw me. Not tired, not overworked, not struggling to keep a small business afloat in a fading town. Defeated. "Maybe I'm just having a good day," I said, finishing my beer. "Or maybe I'm finally seeing things clearly." I headed upstairs, leaving Erin in the kitchen with her confusion. Our bedroom felt smaller than usual, cramped with unspoken accusations and the weight of 15 years of accumulated disappointments. As I changed clothes, I could hear Erin moving around downstairs, probably double-checking that doors were locked and lights were off. The same routine she'd followed for years, except now I wondered if she was really securing the house or just buying time to delete text messages. She came upstairs 20 minutes later, sliding into bed beside me with the careful distance of someone sharing space with a stranger. We lay there in the dark, both pretending to sleep, both knowing the other was awake. "Jack?" Her voice was soft in the darkness. "Are you happy?" The question hung between us like smoke. I could have deflected it, made a joke, turned it back on her. Instead, I told the truth. I was. For a long time, I was happy enough. I rolled onto my side, facing her silhouette in the dim light. "But happy enough isn't really enough, is it?" She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. I closed my eyes and listened to the house settle around us, all those small sounds that meant home. But underneath it all, I could hear something else. The sound of foundations shifting, of structures preparing to collapse. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd start asking the right questions. Tonight, I'd let myself have one last moment of willful ignorance, one final night of pretending my marriage wasn't a house of cards built on quicksand. But even as I drifted toward sleep, part of my mind was already working, planning, calculating. If Erin wanted to play games, she'd picked the wrong opponent. I might be just a grease monkey from a fading town, but I'd learned a few things about taking apart complicated machinery and putting it back together. Sometimes, though, the best repair was a complete rebuild from scratch. The next morning brought rain and revelation in equal measure. I woke to find Erin's side of the bed already cold, which wasn't unusual. She'd been getting up earlier lately, claiming she needed extra time to prepare for important meetings. Now I wondered what kind of preparation those meetings actually required. Downstairs, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Early showing in Millbrook. Back by dinner. Millbrook was 40 minutes away. A convenient distance for someone who wanted to be unreachable for most of the day. Max sat at the breakfast table, working through a bowl of cereal with the methodical focus of a 14-year-old who'd rather be anywhere else. Unlike his sister, Max had inherited my tendency toward quiet observation. He noticed things, filed them away, rarely spoke unless he had something worth saying. "Mom left early again," he said without looking up from his cereal. "So I see." I poured coffee into my travel mug, studying my son's face. Everything okay at school? Max shrugged, a gesture that could mean anything from fine to the world is ending, but I don't want to talk about it. Typical teenager communication. Sophie's been weird lately, he said after a moment. Whispering on the phone a lot. Acting like she knows some big secret. Kids noticed everything. They just didn't always understand what they were seeing. People go through phases, I said, which was true, but not particularly helpful. Speaking of which, you need a ride to school. Nah, I'll bike. Rain's supposed to stop soon. I ruffled his hair, earning a token protest, and headed for the shop. The morning routine felt different now, like I was watching someone else's life from the outside. Same streets, same buildings, same people heading to the same jobs they'd had for years. But now I was seeing it all through a different lens. Cedar Heights had always been the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business. Gossip traveled faster than news, and secrets had a shelf life measured in hours rather than days. If Erin was having an affair, other people knew about it. The question was whether anyone would have the courtesy to tell me. The shop occupied a corner lot on Industrial Avenue, a street that had earned its name back when Cedar Heights actually had industry. Now it was mostly auto repair shops, a few warehouses, and the kind of businesses that survived by being essential rather than exciting. I'd bought the place 12 years ago with money borrowed against our house, a decision that had nearly ended my marriage before it got started. Erin had wanted me to take a management job at the Ford dealership, something with regular hours and benefits, but I'd wanted to build something of my own, even if it meant working twice as hard for half the security. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd risked my marriage to build a business, and now my wife was risking our marriage for a guy who probably couldn't change his own oil. Deshaun Williams was already at work when I arrived, lying under Mrs. Patterson's ancient Buick with his legs sticking out like he was being devoured by automotive quicksand. Deshaun had been my first hire and my best decision as a business owner. Ex-boxer, ex-marine, current philosopher of small-town life and human nature. "Morning, boss," he called out, his voice echoing from underneath the car. "You look like a man with something on his mind." When don't I have something on my mind? Fair point, but this is different. This is the look you get when you're trying to solve a puzzle. He rolled out from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag. What kind of puzzle we talking about? Deshaun had a gift for reading people, probably developed during his years in the ring. He could spot a tell from across the room, knew when someone was bluffing or holding back. It made him invaluable as an employee and dangerous as a friend. Hypothetically, I said, settling onto a stool near his workbench, if someone wanted to confirm whether their spouse was cheating, what would be the smart way to go about it? Deshaun raised an eyebrow. We talking about anyone I know? Hypothetically. Uh-huh. He set down his tools, giving me his full attention. Well, hypothetically, the smart move would be patience. Cheaters get sloppy when they think they're not being watched. They start taking risks, making mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Phone calls at weird times, unexplained expenses, changes in routine. He leaned against the workbench, studying my face. New clothes, new cologne, suddenly caring about fitness. Classic signs. Erin had joined a gym 6 months ago. She'd also started buying more expensive lingerie, claiming it made her feel confident during important business meetings. At the time, I'd been supportive. Now I wondered who was really benefiting from her confidence boost. Hypothetically, I continued, what if someone already had some evidence but wanted to be absolutely sure before making any moves? Depends on what kind of moves they're planning. Deshaun's expression grew serious. If we're talking about confrontation, you want ironclad proof. If we're talking about divorce, you want documentation. If we're talking about revenge. He let the sentence hang there, waiting for me to fill in the blank. I'm not talking about anything illegal, I said. Good. Because illegal gets messy and messy gets expensive. He grabbed a wrench from his toolbox, spinning it between his fingers like a baton. But hypothetically, if someone wanted to turn the tables on a cheating spouse, the key would be patience and precision. Let them think they're winning right up until the moment they realize they've lost everything. The shop bell chimed, announcing our first customer of the day, Mrs. Carlin from my neighborhood, bringing her ancient Honda for its monthly checkup. She was the kind of woman who noticed everything and forgot nothing, a walking surveillance system disguised as a sweet old lady. "Morning, Jack," she said, handing me her keys. "How's Erin doing?" I saw her leaving early this morning. She's been working such long hours lately. "Business is good," I replied, which was true in more ways than one. "That's wonderful. Such a dedicated woman. I was telling my book club just yesterday how impressed I am with her work ethic." Mrs. Carlin smiled innocently, although I did mention that I saw her at the Sunset Motel last week. I was visiting my sister in Millbrook and stopped for gas across the street. Small world, isn't it? There it was. Confirmation delivered with a grandmother's smile and a poison-tipped tongue. Mrs. Carlin knew exactly what she was telling me, and she wanted to make sure I understood. "Small world indeed," I agreed. "I'll have your car ready by noon." After she left, Deshaun whistled low under his breath. "That woman's got more information than the FBI. You want to know what your wife's up to, Mrs. Carlin probably has photos and a timeline." She probably does. I stared at the Honda's keys, thinking about small towns and smaller secrets. The question is, what to do with the information? That depends on what you want the outcome to be. What did I want? A week ago, I would have said I wanted to save my marriage. Now, listening to my daughter trash me while praising my wife's lover, watching neighbors deliver bad news with helpful smiles, I wasn't sure my marriage was worth saving. Maybe what I wanted was justice. Or maybe I just wanted to stop feeling like the only person in town who didn't know his wife was screwing around. The morning passed in routine maintenance and oil changes, but my mind kept circling back to the same questions. How long had it been going on? How many people knew? And most importantly, what was I going to do about it? Around lunchtime, I made a decision. I called Erin's office, using my most innocent voice to ask about her schedule. "Oh, Mr. Thompson," her assistant Jennifer said. "Mrs. Thompson is out showing properties today. She'll be back around 4 for the staff meeting." Staff meeting. That was new information. I thanked Jennifer and hung up, then called the Sunset Motel. "Yeah, we got a Thompson registered," the desk clerk confirmed after I spun a story about being locked out of my room. "Room 237, but checkout's at 11, so if you're planning to extend, you need to let us know." Room 237. I wrote it down, along with the time, 12:30 p.m. If Erin was in Millbrook showing properties, she was doing it from a motel room registered in her name. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed more than circumstantial evidence. I needed something undeniable, something that would give me leverage when the time came to flip the game board. I spent the afternoon thinking about strategy while I worked. By the time Deshaun left at 5, I had the beginnings of a plan. Nothing illegal, nothing that would come back to haunt me in court. Just a little reconnaissance to confirm what I already knew. The Sunset Motel squatted beside Route 9 like a neon tumor, all pink stucco and broken dreams. I parked across the street at a gas station, close enough to watch but far enough away to avoid suspicion. At 6:15, Erin's BMW pulled into the lot. She parked near room 237, checking her phone before getting out. 5 minutes later, a red Mustang convertible arrived. Devon Martinez stepped out wearing gym clothes and a satisfied smile. They embraced in the parking lot like lovers in a movie, all passion and desperation. Then they disappeared into room 237, closing the door on their secret world. I sat in my truck for another hour, taking photos with my phone and making notes. Times, license plates, room number, building a case like a prosecutor preparing for trial. When they finally emerged, laughing and touching each other with casual intimacy, I felt something shift inside me. Not heartbreak. That would have required more surprise. This was something colder and more useful. This was anger refined into purpose. I followed them at a distance as they left in separate cars, Erin heading home to play the dutiful wife, Devon probably heading to the gym to work off his guilt with some innocent college girl. But I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to Flanagan's pub, where Deshawn was nursing a beer and watching the evening news. "You look like a man who found what he was looking for," he said, as I sat down beside him. I did. I ordered a whiskey, something stronger than beer. Now I need to figure out what to do with it. That depends. You want to save your marriage or end it? I thought about Erin laughing in Devon's arms, about Sophie's casual cruelty on the phone, about 15 years of trying to be good enough for people who saw me as a stepping stone to something better. "I want to win," I said finally. Deshawn smiled, the same expression he'd worn in the ring when he'd figured out his opponent's weakness. "Now we're talking," he said. "Let's discuss strategy." The plan took shape over the next 2 weeks like a photograph developing in chemicals, slowly, carefully, with attention to every detail that would make the difference between success and disaster. Deshawn had been right about cheaters getting sloppy. Erin's lies became more elaborate and less believable with each passing day. Business trips that didn't match her company calendar, client meetings that ran impossibly long, phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. She was either having an affair or running a very inefficient spy ring. "I have to work late again tonight," she announced over dinner on a Tuesday, not bothering to look up from her salad. "The Morrison account is demanding a complete market analysis by tomorrow morning." Sophie nodded sympathetically. "That sucks, Mom. Can't someone else handle it?" Unfortunately, the client specifically requested me. Erin glanced at me, probably checking to see if I was buying her story. "I might be very late. Don't wait up." Max pushed food around his plate, saying nothing. But I caught him watching his mother with the same expression he wore when trying to solve difficult math problems. My quiet son was putting pieces together. "No problem," I said, cutting into my pork chop. "I'll probably work late myself." Got a transmission to rebuild. It was a lie, but a harmless one. Unlike Erin's lies, mine served a purpose beyond selfish gratification. After dinner, I helped Max with homework while Erin got ready for her late meeting. She emerged from our bedroom wearing a black dress that cost more than most people's car payments, her hair styled and makeup perfect. "Quite a look for a market analysis," I observed. "Client entertainment is part of the job, Jack. I've explained this before." "Right. Entertainment." I smiled. "Well, entertain responsibly." She kissed my cheek, a gesture so automatic it probably didn't register in her conscious mind. The smell of her perfume lingered after she left, something expensive and cloying that hadn't been in our bathroom 6 months ago. I waited 30 minutes, then told Max I was heading to the shop to work on that transmission. Instead, I drove to the Sunset Motel, parking in my usual spot across the street. Erin's BMW was already there, along with Devon's Mustang. Room 237, same as always, creatures of habit, even in their infidelity. But tonight, I wasn't just observing. Tonight, I was implementing Phase 1 of what Deshawn had dubbed Operation Checkmate. I crossed the street and walked to Devon's car, checking to make sure no one was watching. The Mustang was his pride and joy, a restored 1967 fastback that he'd probably spent more time polishing than he had thinking about the consequences of his actions. From my pocket, I pulled out a small device that looked like a key fob. GPS tracker, purchased online for less than $50. I attached it to the underside of his rear bumper, hidden among the exhaust pipes and suspension components. The tracker would send location data to my phone, creating a detailed record of Devon's movements. Where he went, when he went there, how long he stayed. Information was power, and I was building an arsenal. Next, I walked to Erin's BMW and repeated the process. 2 trackers, 2 targets, 1 very comprehensive surveillance system. As I walked back to my truck, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: anticipation. For the first time since discovering the affair, I was taking action instead of just absorbing punishment. My phone buzzed with a text from Deshawn. Phase 1 complete? Just finished, I replied. Phase 2, tomorrow? Ready when you are. Phase 2 involved a different kind of surveillance. Deshawn had a friend named Marcus who ran a private investigation service out of Millbrook. Nothing fancy, mostly insurance fraud and cheating spouses, but Marcus had the right equipment and the right attitude. Your husband wants documentation, Deshawn had explained when he made the introduction. Video, photos, timestamps, the kind of evidence that holds up in court. Marcus was a thin, nervous man who looked like he'd been built from spare parts and anxiety. But he was thorough, professional, and most importantly, discreet. Standard adultery package, he said when we met at a diner halfway between Cedar Heights and Millbrook. Video surveillance, photographic evidence, detailed reports, runs about $1,500 for a complete package. $1,500. A significant chunk of my savings, but cheaper than a divorce lawyer and infinitely more satisfying than wondering. How long does it usually take? I asked. Depends on how often they meet and how careful they are. Based on what you've told me, probably a week. 2 at the most. Marcus stirred sugar into coffee that already looked sweet enough to send a diabetic into shock. Most cheaters follow patterns. Same places, same times, same mistakes. What kind of mistakes? They get comfortable. Start taking risks they wouldn't take at the beginning. Public displays of affection, using credit cards, getting sloppy with alibis. He pulled out a tablet, showing me photos from previous cases. See this couple? Started out meeting in different motels, paying cash, keeping everything secret. 6 months later, they're having dinner at restaurants, holding hands at the movies, acting like a real couple. The photos were depressingly familiar. Couples laughing, kissing, looking at each other with the kind of intensity that comes from forbidden attraction. I wondered if Erin and Devon looked at each other that way. I'll need some basic information, Marcus continued. Full names, addresses, work schedules, vehicle descriptions. The more details you can provide, the faster I can work. I gave him everything. Erin's real estate schedule, Devon's gym hours, their preferred meeting spots. I felt like a general briefing a spy, preparing for a mission that would determine the outcome of a war. One more thing, Marcus said as we prepared to leave. What's your endgame here? Divorce, reconciliation, or something else? I'm not sure yet. Fair enough. But think about it, because the kind of evidence I gather can be used different ways. Divorce court, public embarrassment, leverage for negotiations. The approach changes depending on your goals. Goals. What were my goals? A week ago, I might have said I wanted to save my marriage. Now, after watching my wife lie to my face while planning her next rendezvous, I wasn't sure my marriage was worth saving. Maybe what I wanted was simpler. I wanted to stop being the victim in my own life. The next few days passed in a strange state of suspended animation. I went through the motions of normal life while secretly monitoring my wife's movements through GPS tracking and Marcus's surveillance reports. Erin and Devon met 4 times in 6 days, always at the Sunset Motel, always for 2 to 3 hours, always with elaborate cover stories that wouldn't fool a reasonably intelligent child. Marcus's photos were devastatingly comprehensive. Erin and Devon arriving separately, embracing in the parking lot, disappearing into room 237, emerging disheveled and satisfied, kissing goodbye like teenagers at summer camp. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source, Sophie. I was working late at the shop when she called, her voice tight with excitement and malice. Dad, you need to know something about Mom. What's that, sweetheart? She's been lying about working late. Madison's mom saw her at Romano's restaurant last night with some guy. They were holding hands and everything. Romano's was the nicest restaurant in Cedar Heights, the kind of place you took someone when you wanted to make an impression. It was also completely public, visible to anyone who happened to be driving past. Are you sure it was your mother? Madison's mom knows what mom looks like, Dad. She said they looked like they were on a date. Sophie's voice carried a note of uncertainty now, as if she was beginning to understand the implications of what she was saying. Did she recognize the man? She thinks it was that trainer guy from Mom's gym. Devon something. There it was. My daughter, who had spent weeks defending her mother and criticizing me, had just handed me the final piece of evidence I needed. Sophie, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't mention this conversation to your mother. Can you do that? Why not? Because I need to handle this situation properly, and that means having all the facts first. A long pause. Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. How do you tell your 17-year-old daughter that her mother is having an affair? How do you explain that the family she's known her entire life is built on lies and betrayal? I don't know yet, sweetheart. But whatever happens, you and Max are the most important things in my life. That will never change. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet shop, surrounded by the familiar smells of oil and metal, thinking about the strange turns life takes. A month ago, I'd been a happily married man with 2 kids and a successful business. Now I was a cuckold, planning revenge against a wife who saw me as an obstacle to her happiness. The transformation should have been more painful. Instead, it felt like waking up from a long, confusing dream. I called Marcus and told him to wrap up his surveillance. I had enough evidence to sink a battleship, let alone end a marriage. Now came the hard part, deciding what to do with it. Deshawn found me at Flanagan's that night, staring into a whiskey glass like it contained the secrets of the universe. You look like a man who's reached a decision, he said, settling onto the bar stool beside me. I have. I finished my drink, feeling the burn all the way down. I'm done being the good guy. What's the play? I thought about Erin laughing with Devon at Romano's, about Sophie's casual cruelty, about 15 years of trying to be enough for people who saw me as a consolation prize. I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve, I said. All of them. Deshawn smiled. Now you're talking my language. When do we start? Tomorrow night. There's a company party at the Marriott. Erin's entire real estate firm will be there, along with their spouses and significant others. And Devon will be there too. Erin's been hinting that she wants to bring him as her guest, introduce him around as a business associate. Public debut of the happy couple? Something like that. I signaled the bartender for another round. They want to go public? I'll help them go public. Deshawn raised his glass in a toast. To public relations. To consequences, I corrected. We drank to revenge, and it tasted better than I'd expected. The Marriott ballroom glittered like a jewelry store, all crystal chandeliers and polished marble. Erin's real estate firm had spared no expense for their annual awards banquet, transforming the space into something that belonged in a magazine spread rather than Cedar Heights, Michigan. I stood near the bar, nursing a scotch and watching my wife work the room. She moved through the crowd like a politician, all smiles and air kisses, her black cocktail dress catching the light as she laughed at jokes that probably weren't funny. Devon followed 3 steps behind, playing the role of attentive colleague. To anyone who didn't know better, they looked professional. But I could see the way his eyes tracked her movement, the way she touched his arm when making introductions. The subtle intimacy that comes from sharing secrets. You clean up nice, Deshawn said, appearing at my elbow. He wore a dark suit that made him look more like a federal agent than a mechanic. Ready for this? Ready as I'll ever be. I'd spent the afternoon preparing, reviewing Marcus's surveillance photos and rehearsing what I was going to say. The key was timing and presentation. Too early, and people might leave before the show was over. Too late, and the audience would be too drunk to appreciate the performance. "There's our target," Deshawn murmured, nodding toward the head table where Erin's boss, Richard Hoffman, was holding court with the company's top performers. Richard was a small man with expensive tastes and a reputation for ruthless business practices. He'd built Hoffman Realty from a 2-person operation into the largest firm in 3 counties, and he didn't tolerate anything that threatened his company's reputation. More importantly, he was old-fashioned enough to disapprove of workplace affairs, especially when they involved married employees. "Mr. Hoffman," I said, approaching the table with a smile that felt like broken glass. "Jack Thompson, Erin's husband." "Of course, Jack." Richard stood, extending a hand. "Great to see you. Erin's told me so much about you. All good things, I hope." I shook his hand, noting the slight confusion in his eyes. Erin had probably told him as little as possible about her blue-collar husband. "Absolutely. She's very proud of your business success." That's kind of her. I glanced around the table, recognizing several faces from Erin's work stories. I'm actually proud of her success, too. She's been working so hard lately, staying late for client meetings, weekend property showings, very dedicated. She is indeed one of our top performers. I'm sure Devon would agree. I nodded toward the bar, where Devon was getting drinks. He's been helping her with several difficult clients. Very hands-on approach. Something flickered in Richard's expression. "Devon Martinez, the personal trainer?" "That's the one. Erin says he's been invaluable for client entertainment. They've been spending a lot of time together, building relationships." I paused, letting the implications settle. "In fact, I think they're planning to work together on the Morrison account." "The Morrison account?" Richard's voice sharpened. "That's a solo assignment. Erin specifically requested to handle it alone." "Really? That's strange." She mentioned having several late-night strategy sessions with Devon to prepare for the presentation. I could see the wheels turning in Richard's head. He was a smart man who'd built his business by paying attention to details and reading between lines. The picture I was painting didn't require much interpretation. "Excuse me," he said, standing abruptly. "I need to speak with someone." I watched him walk toward Erin, his expression thunderous. This was going to be interesting. Deshawn materialized beside me, holding 2 drinks. Phase 1 complete. Just getting started. Across the room, Richard was having an intense conversation with Erin. Her face went through several expressions: confusion, understanding, anger, and finally fear. She glanced toward me, her eyes wide with something approaching panic. Devon appeared at her side, probably wondering why his lover looked like she'd seen a ghost. Richard said something to him that made his face go pale. "Trouble in paradise," Deshawn observed. "The night's still young." I excused myself from the table and walked toward the small stage where the evening's presentations would take place. The microphone was already set up, waiting for Richard's welcome speech, but Richard was busy having what looked like a very uncomfortable conversation with his star employee and her business associate. Perfect. I stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone to get everyone's attention. The feedback squeal cut through the party chatter like a fire alarm. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment." The room gradually quieted, faces turning toward the stage with polite curiosity. I could see Erin pushing through the crowd, probably trying to reach me before I said something embarrassing. Too late for that. "My name is Jack Thompson, and I'm here tonight as the proud husband of one of your top agents, Erin Thompson." Polite applause. A few people smiled and nodded. Erin had stopped moving, frozen in the middle of the crowd like a deer in headlights. I wanted to take this opportunity to publicly thank everyone who supported Erin's career growth over the past year, especially those who've gone above and beyond the call of duty. I pulled out my phone, connecting it to the room's audio-visual system with a cable I'd prepared earlier. The large screen behind me flickered to life. For instance, I'd like to thank Devon Martinez for his dedicated support of my wife's professional development. The first photo appeared on screen. Erin and Devon embracing in the parking lot of the Sunset Motel. The image was crystal clear, professionally shot, undeniably damning. Gasps echoed through the room. Someone dropped a glass. Their working relationship has been quite intensive, I continued, advancing to the next photo. Multiple meetings per week, often lasting several hours. More photos. Erin and Devon entering the motel room, emerging disheveled, kissing goodbye. Marcus had done excellent work, and I have to admire their commitment to client entertainment. The next image showed them at Romano's restaurant, holding hands across the table. Really going above and beyond to build those personal relationships. The room was silent now, except for the sound of Erin sobbing somewhere in the crowd. I could see Richard's face, red with fury and embarrassment. Devon was nowhere to be seen, probably looking for the nearest exit. Of course, all this dedication comes at a cost. Erin's been working such long hours that we barely see each other anymore. But I understand. When you're passionate about your work, family has to take a back seat. I advanced to the final photo. A time-stamped image of Erin and Devon entering the motel room just 2 days ago, while she was supposedly at a client meeting. So I wanted to publicly acknowledge their partnership and wish them luck in all their future endeavors, both professional and personal. I disconnected my phone, leaving the final image frozen on the screen. Thank you for your attention, and enjoy the rest of your evening. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, whispers began to spread through the crowd like wildfire. I could see people pulling out their phones, probably taking pictures of the screen or texting friends who hadn't been invited to the party. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Cedar Heights would know that Erin Thompson had been caught cheating on her husband in the most public way possible. I stepped down from the stage and walked toward the exit, feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, I could hear the party dissolving into chaos, raised voices, hurried conversations, the sound of someone being sick in the bathroom. Deshawn caught up with me in the lobby. That was beautiful, man. Absolutely beautiful. Think it was too much? Are you kidding? That was perfect. Surgical precision. He clapped me on the shoulder. How do you feel? I considered the question. How did I feel? Not guilty, which surprised me. Not sad, which surprised me more. If anything, I felt relieved. I feel like I just took out the trash, I said finally. What's next? I thought about Erin, probably crying in the bathroom while her colleagues whispered about her disgrace. I thought about Devon, who discovered that actions have consequences. I thought about Sophie, who would have to reconsider her assumptions about which parent deserved her loyalty. Now we see how they handle the aftermath, I said, and then we decide whether they've learned their lesson. We walked out into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage of my marriage behind us. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own life. The villain had finally taken center stage, and the performance was just getting started. The fallout began before I made it home. My phone started buzzing with calls and texts while I was still in the Marriott parking lot, each message adding another layer to the chaos I'd unleashed. The first call came from Sophie, her voice shaking with rage and disbelief. Dad, what the hell did you do? Mom is crying so hard she can barely breathe, and everyone at the party is staring at her like she's some kind of criminal. I told the truth, I said, starting my truck. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. You humiliated her in front of her entire company. How could you do that? How could I do that? I pulled out of the parking lot, watching the Marriott disappear in my rearview mirror. Sophie, your mother has been lying to our family for months. She's been having an affair with Devon while pretending to work late. She's been stealing time from our marriage to build a relationship with another man. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, quietly, you could have handled it differently. Yes, I could have. I could have confronted her privately, given her a chance to lie some more, let her control the narrative and make me look like the villain for not trusting her. I turned onto Maple Street, seeing our house in the distance. Instead, I made sure everyone knows exactly who she really is. She's still my mother, and she's still my wife. That didn't stop her from screwing around with a personal trainer. Sophie hung up on me, which I'd expected. She was 17 and still believed in fairy tale endings, where everyone learned their lessons and lived happily ever after. Reality was messier than that. The second call came from Max, his voice quiet and confused. "Dad?" Sophie's freaking out, and I don't understand what's happening. She keeps saying you did something terrible to Mom. "I exposed your mother's affair," I said, pulling into our driveway. "She's been cheating on me for months, and I made sure her colleagues knew about it." A long pause. "With that trainer guy?" "Devon?" "Yes." I knew something was weird. She's been acting different, and you've been acting different, and Sophie's been acting like she knows some big secret. Another pause. "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question I'd been dreading, asked by the child who deserved an honest answer. "Probably." "I'm sorry, Max. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear." "It's okay," he said, though his voice suggested it wasn't okay at all. "I mean, it sucks, but it's not your fault. If Mom was cheating, then she's the one who messed everything up. My 14-year-old son had grasped the basic concept of cause and effect better than his older sister. There was hope for the next generation after all." I sat in my truck for a few minutes after Max hung up, staring at our house and thinking about the conversation I was about to have with Erin. She'd probably beaten me home, assuming she'd left the party immediately after my presentation. The question was whether she'd be in attack mode or damage control mode. The front door was unlocked, which meant she was definitely home. I found her in the living room, still wearing her cocktail dress, clutching a glass of wine like a life preserver. Her makeup was ruined, her hair disheveled, her eyes red from crying. She looked up when I entered, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. "Jack," she said, her voice hoarse, "we need to talk." "Now you want to talk?" Interesting timing. I sat down across from her, noting how she flinched when I moved. Good. Let her be afraid. Fear was honest, and honesty had been in short supply in our house lately. "What you did tonight?" she began, then stopped, shaking her head. "I can't believe you would humiliate me like that in front of my colleagues. I can't believe you would humiliate me by screwing another man for 6 months. "It's not what you think." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Really? Because what I think is that you've been having an affair with Devon Martinez. You've been meeting him at the Sunset Motel 2 or 3 times a week. You've been lying to me and our children about working late while you were actually building a relationship with another man." Erin's face crumpled. "How did you find out?" "Does it matter?" "The point is, I know. Everyone knows now. You hired someone to follow me, didn't you? You had me investigated like some kind of criminal. You were acting like a criminal. Lying, sneaking around, stealing time and money from our family to fund your affair." She set down her wine glass with shaking hands. "I never meant for it to happen. It just developed." "Things don't just develop, Erin. People make choices. You chose to start a relationship with Devon. You chose to lie to me about it. You chose to continue lying even when you had multiple opportunities to tell the truth. I was going to tell you. When? After you filed for divorce? After you moved in with him? After our kids figured it out on their own?" She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "Tomorrow morning, you're going to call a divorce lawyer. You're going to file for divorce on grounds of adultery, and you're going to accept whatever settlement I'm willing to offer. Jack, please, can't we try to work this out? Go to counseling, try to rebuild. Rebuild what? A marriage based on lies and betrayal? A relationship where I have to wonder every time you leave the house whether you're actually going where you say you're going? I stood up, looking down at the woman I'd been married to for 15 years. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by the weight of her own choices. You wanted freedom, Erin. You wanted excitement, passion, something different from boring old Jack and his boring old life. Well, congratulations. You're about to get all the freedom you can handle. What about the kids? What about them? You should have thought about the kids before you started your affair. You should have considered how your choices would affect Sophie and Max before you decided that your happiness was more important than their family stability. Erin began crying again, but I felt no sympathy. She'd made her choices with full knowledge of the potential consequences. The fact that those consequences had finally arrived didn't make her a victim. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight, I said. Tomorrow we start the process of untangling 15 years of marriage. I suggest you use the time between now and then to figure out how you're going to explain this to your children. I left her crying in the living room and went upstairs to pack a bag. The guest room was small and impersonal, but it felt more honest than continuing to share a bed with a woman who'd been sharing herself with someone else. My phone buzzed with a text from Devon. How did it go? About as expected, I replied. She's devastated. The kids are confused, and I feel like I've been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there. Regrets? I thought about the question. Did I regret exposing Erin's affair in such a public way? Did I regret destroying her reputation and probably her career? Did I regret turning my family's private drama into public entertainment? None, I typed back, and I meant it. For months, I'd been the victim in my own life, absorbing punishment and betrayal while trying to be the good guy. Tonight, I'd taken control. I'd stopped being reactive and started being proactive. It felt better than I'd expected. The next morning brought a parade of consequences. Erin's phone rang constantly. Colleagues, friends, family members who'd heard about the previous night's drama. She answered some calls with tearful explanations, ignored others entirely. Sophie barely spoke to me, shooting accusatory looks across the breakfast table while Max ate his cereal in thoughtful silence. Your father destroyed my career last night, Erin announced, apparently deciding that honesty was now the best policy. I'll probably lose my job because of his little stunt. You destroyed your own career, I corrected, not looking up from my coffee. I just made sure everyone knew about it. Same thing. No, it's not. You created the situation. I just refused to help you cover it up. Sophie slammed down her spoon. You could have handled it privately. You didn't have to embarrass her in front of everyone. Why should I protect her reputation when she didn't protect our marriage? Because that's what decent people do. I looked at my daughter, seeing Erin's self-righteousness reflected in her 17-year-old face. Decent people don't have affairs, Sophie. Decent people don't lie to their families for months while building relationships with other people. If your mother wanted to be treated with decency, she should have acted decently. Max finally spoke up. Mom, did you really cheat on Dad? Erin's face went white. It's complicated, sweetheart. It's not complicated, I said. She had an affair with Devon Martinez. She lied about it for months. Those are facts, not complications. I never meant to hurt anyone, Erin said, tears starting again. But you did hurt people. You hurt me, you hurt Sophie, you hurt Max. The fact that you didn't intend the consequences doesn't make them disappear. I finished my coffee and stood up. I'm going to the shop. When I get home tonight, I expect you to have called a lawyer. The shop felt like a sanctuary, familiar and honest, in a way my house no longer did. Devon was already there, working on Mrs. Patterson's Buick with the focused intensity of a surgeon. Morning, boss. You look like a man who slept well. Better than I have in months. I hung up my jacket, noting how normal everything felt. Any word from the gossip network? Oh, brother. Mrs. Carlin stopped by first thing this morning. Apparently, The whole town's talking about last night. She wanted to know if you needed any casseroles or emotional support. What did you tell her? That you were handling things just fine and didn't need any casseroles? Deshawn grinned. She seemed disappointed. I think she was hoping for more drama. She'll get plenty of drama. This is just the beginning. And it was. Over the next week, the consequences of my public revelation rippled through Cedar Heights like stones thrown into a still pond. Erin was fired from Hoffman Realty, her reputation in ruins. Devon left town, apparently deciding that a small-town scandal wasn't worth the complications. Sophie gradually came around as the reality of her mother's choices sank in. Max, with the resilience of youth, adapted to the new normal with surprising grace. As for me, I felt like I'd been reborn. No more wondering, no more doubt, no more playing the victim in my own life. I'd taken control, accepted the consequences, and moved forward. The villain had won, and victory tasted better than I'd ever imagined. But the story wasn't over yet. There was still one more act to play, one final scene that would determine how this drama really ended, and I had a feeling it was going to be spectacular. 3 months after the Marriott incident, Cedar Heights had settled into a new rhythm of gossip and speculation. Erin had moved into a small apartment across town, taking a job at a discount real estate firm that specialized in foreclosures and repo sales. Sophie had grudgingly accepted the reality of our situation, while Max had thrived in the honesty of our new dynamic. I thought the drama was over. I was wrong. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was rebuilding an engine, my hands deep in the mechanical complexity that had always made more sense to me than human relationships. Jack, it's Jennifer, from Hoffman Realty. Erin's former assistant sounded nervous, her voice tight with the kind of tension that comes from delivering bad news. What can I do for you, Jennifer? I thought you should know. Erin's been calling the office, trying to get clients to follow her to her new firm. She's also been telling people that you fabricated the evidence against her, that the photos were fake, that you hired someone to set her up. I set down my wrench, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. Is anyone believing her? Some people are. She's very convincing when she wants to be, and she's playing the victim card pretty hard. Wronged wife, vindictive husband, that sort of thing. I see. There's more. She's been in contact with Devon. He's back in town, and they're not being particularly discreet about their relationship anymore. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet shop, thinking about the strange persistence of human nature. Erin had lost her job, her reputation, and her marriage because of her affair. The logical response would be to end the relationship that had caused so much damage. Instead, she was doubling down. Deshawn found me there an hour later, staring at the half-assembled engine like it contained the secrets of the universe. You look like a man who's received interesting news, he said, settling onto a stool beside my workbench. I told him about Jennifer's call, watching his expression shift from amusement to concern. So she's trying to rewrite history, he said when I finished. Make herself the victim and you the villain. Apparently, and she's back with Devon. Publicly this time. Deshawn whistled low. That woman has more nerve than sense. After everything that happened, she's going to parade around town with her lover like nothing happened? Looks that way. What are you going to do about it? I thought about the question. What was I going to do? I'd already exposed Erin's affair, destroyed her career, and initiated divorce proceedings. In any reasonable world, that would be the end of the story. But this wasn't a reasonable world. This was Cedar Heights, where gossip was currency and reputation was everything. If Erin was going to try to rehabilitate her image by making me the villain, I needed to respond appropriately. I'm going to remind everyone why they shouldn't trust liars, I said finally. The plan took shape over the next few days, built on the same foundation of patience and precision that had made the Marriott revelation so effective. But this time I wasn't just exposing Erin's affair, I was exposing her character. The opportunity came at the annual Cedar Heights Community Festival, a weekend-long celebration that brought together everyone in town for food, music, and the kind of forced merriment that small communities specialized in. Erin and Devon attended together, making their first public appearance as a couple since the scandal. They walked through the festival grounds hand in hand, smiling and laughing like they were starring in a romantic comedy instead of a cautionary tale about adultery and consequences. I watched them from the volunteer booth where I was helping to sell raffle tickets for the volunteer fire department. They seemed happy, carefree, unburdened by guilt or shame. It was almost admirable, in a sociopathic sort of way. "Look at them," Mrs. Carlin said, appearing at my elbow with the stealth of a professional gossip. "Acting like they're some kind of fairy tale couple instead of a pair of homewreckers." "People see what they want to see," I replied, handing change to a customer. "Well, I see a woman who destroyed her marriage for a man half her age, and I see a man who was stupid enough to get involved with a married woman." Mrs. Carlin adjusted her glasses, focusing on Erin and Devon like a sniper acquiring targets. "Mark my words, Jack. This won't end well for either of them." She was right, though not for the reasons she imagined. At 2:00, the festival's main event began, the annual talent show, where local residents showcased everything from singing to juggling to questionable comedy routines. It was the kind of small-town entertainment that was simultaneously endearing and excruciating. I'd signed up to perform, claiming I wanted to share a personal story with the community. The organizers had been thrilled. Local drama was always popular, and my situation with Erin had provided months of entertainment. When my name was called, I walked onto the small stage that had been erected in the town square, looking out at a crowd of familiar faces. Erin and Devon sat in the third row, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern as they realized what was about to happen. "Good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Jack Thompson. I own Thompson's Auto Repair on Industrial Avenue." Polite applause. A few people smiled and waved, normal small-town friendliness. I wanted to take this opportunity to share something personal with all of you. A story about trust, betrayal, and the importance of taking responsibility for our actions. I could see Erin's face going pale. Devon was looking around like he was calculating the distance to the nearest exit. 3 months ago, I discovered that my wife was having an affair. Not through any dramatic confrontation or tearful confession, but through old-fashioned detective work. Phone records, credit card statements, surveillance photos. I pulled out a folder, thick with documentation. I have here copies of hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and phone records that detail a 6-month affair between my wife Erin and Devon Martinez. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People were pulling out their phones, probably recording what was about to become the most talked-about performance in Cedar Heights history. Now, some of you might be wondering why I'm sharing this information publicly instead of handling it privately. That's a fair question, and it deserves an honest answer. I opened the folder, pulling out the first document. This is a credit card statement showing charges at the Sunset Motel, Romano's Restaurant, and Victoria's Secret, all on dates when my wife claimed to be working late. I held up the paper so the crowd could see it, then moved to the next document. This is a phone record showing over 300 text messages between my wife and Mr. Martinez in a single month. That's 10 messages per day, every day for 30 days. More murmurs. I could see Erin trying to shrink into her seat, but there was nowhere to hide in a crowd of 300 people. "And this," I said, pulling out a photograph, "is a surveillance photo taken last week of my wife and Mr. Martinez entering the same motel room they've been using for their affairs." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word like I was delivering the State of the Union address. "You see, my wife has been telling people that I fabricated evidence against her, that the photos I showed at her company party were fake, that I hired someone to set her up because I was jealous of her success." I smiled, the expression feeling sharp enough to cut glass. "So I thought it would be appropriate to share the real evidence with all of you, so you can make your own judgments about who's telling the truth." I pulled out more photos, more documents, More proof of Erin's affair than any reasonable person could dispute. Phone records, credit card statements, surveillance photos, witness statements, an entire relationship documented in excruciating detail. The truth is, I didn't fabricate anything. I simply refused to help cover up a lie that was destroying my family. I looked directly at Erin, seeing tears streaming down her face. Devon had his arm around her shoulders, but he looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership built on trust and honesty. When one person breaks that trust, they don't get to control how the other person responds. They don't get to play the victim when the consequences of their choices finally catch up with them. I closed the folder, setting it on the podium like evidence in a trial. I'm sharing this with all of you because I believe in accountability. I believe that actions have consequences, and those consequences should be public when the actions affect an entire community. I paused, looking out at the crowd of faces, some sympathetic, some shocked, some clearly entertained by the drama. Erin Thompson chose to have an affair. She chose to lie about it for 6 months. She chose to continue that affair even after being caught. Those were her choices, made freely and with full knowledge of the potential consequences. I stepped back from the podium, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'm not asking for your sympathy or your judgment. I'm simply asking that you remember this moment the next time someone tries to convince you that victims are really villains and villains are really victims. The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly, someone began to clap. Others joined in until the entire crowd was applauding. Not for entertainment, but for honesty, for courage, for refusing to be a victim. I walked off the stage and through the crowd, people patting my shoulder and offering words of support. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of conversation as 300 people discussed what they'd just witnessed. Erin and Devon were gone, their seats empty, probably heading home to discuss damage control and exit strategies. But it was too late for damage control. The truth was out there now, documented and witnessed by everyone who mattered in our small town. There would be no more revisionist history, no more playing the victim, no more attempts to make me the villain in their story. I found Deshaun waiting by my truck, grinning like he'd just witnessed the greatest performance in theatrical history. That, he said, was absolutely beautiful. Surgical precision, perfect timing, devastating execution. Think it was too much? Are you kidding? That was exactly enough. You didn't attack them, didn't call them names, didn't make threats. You just presented facts and let people draw their own conclusions. I looked back toward the festival grounds, where the talent show was continuing with a 12-year-old girl singing a country song about heartbreak. Life was moving on, as it always did. What happens now? I asked. Now? Now you get to live your life without wondering what people are saying behind your back. Now you get to move forward without carrying the weight of someone else's lies. He was right. For the first time in months, I felt completely free. No more secrets, no more wondering, no more playing defense in my own life. The villain had taken his final bow, and the performance was complete. 6 months later, I ran into Erin at the grocery store. She looked older, worn down by the weight of consequences she'd never expected to carry. Devon was nowhere to be seen. Apparently, their great love affair hadn't survived the harsh light of public scrutiny. "Jack," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Erin." We stood there for a moment, two people who'd once shared everything and now shared nothing but a complicated history, and two children who were learning to navigate a world built on honesty instead of lies. "I want you to know," she said finally, "that I never meant for things to end up this way." "I know," I replied, "but they did end up this way, and that's something you'll have to live with." She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" I thought about the question. Forgiveness was supposed to be healing, liberating, the mature response to betrayal and hurt. But forgiveness implied that the relationship had value worth preserving, that the person seeking forgiveness had learned from their mistakes. Looking at Erin, I saw someone who was sorry she'd been caught, sorry she'd faced consequences, sorry her life hadn't turned out the way she'd planned. But I didn't see someone who truly understood the damage she'd caused, or who was committed to becoming a better person. I don't think about forgiveness anymore, I said, finally. I think about moving forward. She nodded again, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The kids miss having us all together. The kids are adapting. They're learning that sometimes families change, and that's not always a bad thing. Sophie still blames you for what happened. Sophie's 17. She'll figure out the truth eventually. We said goodbye and went our separate ways, two people who'd once been everything to each other and were now just strangers with shared memories. That night, I sat in my new apartment, smaller than the house on Maple Street, but honest in a way my marriage had never been, and thought about the strange journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd been a husband and father living what I thought was a normal life. Now I was a divorced man who'd become something of a local legend, the guy who'd refused to be a victim and had turned the tables on his cheating wife in the most public way possible. Some people called me a hero. Others called me a villain. I preferred to think of myself as someone who'd simply refused to accept a role he hadn't auditioned for. The phone rang, interrupting my reflection. It was Max, calling from his mother's apartment. "Dad? Can I come stay with you this weekend?" "Of course." "Everything okay?" "Yeah, it's easier at your place. More honest, you know?" I smiled, feeling something warm settle in my chest. My son understood the difference between comfort and honesty, between keeping peace and keeping integrity. "I'll pick you up tomorrow after school," I said. After I hung up, I poured myself a drink and raised it in a toast to the empty apartment. "To consequences," I said aloud, "and to the people brave enough to face them." I drank to the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, to the loss of illusions and the birth of clarity. The villain had won, but more importantly, the victim had disappeared. And that, I thought, was the best possible ending to a story that had started with lies and ended with truth.